as you prepare to work on the audio portion of our multimedia project, I want to share just some quick tips and tricks for writing for audio because it is different than writing for video or just writing a paper. So, when we talk about audio writing, what we're really talking about is writing for broadcast or maybe a podcast, but ultimately writing for the ears, what people are going to hear. And it is a presentational style of writing where elements outside of just written words are going to come into play. Because we're not going to pick up on things like visual imagery or nonverbal gestures, we really have to consider some of the other nonverbal components that come into play. Things like the volume of our voice, the inflection of our voice, the pacing, sound effects, other things we can bring in that are going to enrich and enhance that hearing experience, but also reinforce our messaging. Now, there are three similarities between writing for broadcast and writing for print. First, you're still going to be writing for who your audience is. So really consider who the audience that is listening is going to be. Now, for most of our assignments, we're going to be writing for a general audience. So you really need to think about someone who's going to be just sort of your average person, doesn't know a lot about communication per se, doesn't know a lot about the theories we're going to be exploring, and you need to explain it in a way that's going to be very accessible. Remember that the average reading level in the United States is a sixth grade level. So if you write for a general audience, you really should be writing like you're talking to a sixth grader. Just avoid the jargon and stereotypical language, right? The slang. You're also still writing for a purpose or goal. So before you start writing, really think about what is the intention of this message? What am I trying to achieve with what I'm writing here? And then last, write for the medium. You'll be using a script again, but this time an audio script to write for that specific medium. And you want to make sure that it is suitable for what is going to be heard. Now, when we talk about audio writing, what we're really talking about is oral communication, not oral, aural, which is linear communication that we hear. And we are not great listeners. So when we think about writing for audio, we have to take that into account. We have to be very clear and direct about how we articulate our message. Because message delivery is different than reading, we need to have an even greater emphasis on clarity. We're also going to focus on broad concepts instead of specific details because it's hard for our brain to remember specific details when we only hear them. And then it's going to lack imagery. So because of that, we really have to think of other ways to enhance and emphasize our message that are not built around visual components. And there are 10 rules for audio writing you should follow. First, make sure whoever your narrator, announcer, whoever is going to be speaking has room to breathe. You don't want to pack a script so tight that it's going to not allow them any time to take a breath. Additionally, you want to present one idea at a time. Keep each sentence short and revolving around a singular subject. You should also try to make it personal to your audience. Make sure it really feels like you're talking to them. That is the advantage of an audio format, is it can feel like a conversation when it's done right. When you're doing attributions or paraphrases, you should put them first. This again helps with the potential mental confusion we get when we're hearing something. So what this means is if you're talking about something that I did, right, Professor V, you would say, Professor V says, da da da, versus saying whatever the quote was, said Professor V. That gets too complicated of a sentence structure to follow while we're listening. Similarly, I encourage you to write subject, verb, object. This really is the most simplistic sentence style where we talk about what the subject does to something. So Professor V eats an apple. Very second grade feeling, but it is the most simple sentence structure, which means it's going to be easy for listeners to understand. We're also going to use our best to use active voice and present tense, which means talking about something in the here and now. Professor V eats an apple, right? Not Professor V ate an apple. Keep it in present tense and use that active voice to really encourage the immediacy and recency of it. You should write as you would talk because ultimately this is going to be said aloud. So we need to make sure it's not something cumbersome to read aloud, that it's not something that's going to be complicated to read. So write as you would talk. Make numbers easy to read in script, and there's some rules sort of following this. Usually we say any number below 10 gets written out, and anything that is 2 digits or above is going to get a numerical number. And then make it easy to find with keywords. Make sure that what you're talking about subject-wise is recurring enough in your audio that those keywords are really apparent. Similarly, when we talk about actually posting something to a channel, you would want to make sure that your tags, your description, your title all use keywords. We're not going to have to worry about that for our assignment because we're not posting our audio recordings anywhere. But certainly if you were creating a podcast episode, you'd want to make sure the keywords about your podcast episode were really evident. Now, when it comes to scripting for audio, and you will have to create a script for this assignment, you need to have these two main things. First, the message. Write the script to be sure that the message is presented accurately and clearly. Make sure it's easy to read out loud. Make sure it has all of the components asked of you. And then the extras. These are the things that contain details of the nonverbal components that are happening along with what you've described in the script. So this could be music, pre-recorded sound bites, or even sound effects that you're planning to include. I do encourage you in your script to use large typefaces, and in this one case, it should be double spaced because that helps read aloud easier. And I do suggest using a 2-column script format, but I'll show you 3 different options you can actually choose from when you create your script because it really depends on what type of audio recording you're planning to create for your project. And here are those 3 different types. You can choose any of these 3. I won't be providing a template for these, but you could easily modify the video script to be that 2-column format that you see in the middle. But starting from left to right, the first is an announcer continuity, and this is created for a feature on a radio station. Usually a continuity is something that's read out loud by a radio announcer to advertise something, right? So you can see here on the example, they're advertising something called Slim Wims, and you can see the continuity script is actually pretty short. Now, this is probably too short for what you're going to need to do for our multimedia project because there's a couple things you have to cover in your script, but certainly you could use this format if you wanted to. The middle script, this is the one that is most commonly used, the radio advertisement production script. This is a 2-column script format, but unlike the video script, instead of having what we're going to see on the left-hand side and what we're going to hear on the right-hand side, you instead have all of the details of who's saying what and any sound effects or audio supplements on the left-hand side, and then what's actually being said double spaced on the right-hand side. So quite similar to the video script, just a little bit different because of course we don't have those visual components. And then a lot of my students actually do prefer this 1-column hybrid production script. This is something you can easily do in Word, and you'll see the top has the title, who the client or sponsor is. You won't need that for your project. The length of the audio recording or what you estimate it's going to be. And then of course you don't need the air date because we're not airing these. But you'll see that they have a description of the sound effects that are happening, then what the announcer's saying, then the sound effects, the music, what the announcer's saying, and just sort of laying it out really clearly. Notice that all 3 of these are double spaced, but ultimately it's up to you how you want to format your audio script. I just ask that you select one of these 3 formats. Now, some terms to know for audio when you're adding elements to your script. Well, first, actuality. This is a recorded quote that may accompany a news release or a program, but we more commonly know it as a sound bite. Crossfade, that's where we overlap audio as one source fades in and the other fades out. This is often done with music. The established then under, this is music that plays at full volume for a short time, then lowers to allow use under voices. This we often see at the beginning of, say, a movie or TV show where the credits will feature the music at full volume, and then as the characters appear on screen and start interacting with each other, it'll fade out. A fade, that's just a gradual decrease of volume. RT, if you ever see this, it just means running time, how long the video or audio is going to go on. It's usually specified in the script. SFX, those are sound effects. SOT, that's sound on tape. This is use of sound or music from a recording. Under, this is quiet background sound or music that runs under the voices. It should not be distracting from the voices. It should not overpower the narration or other audio, but rather just really set the mood underneath. And then last, VO, this is a voiceover. These are words that are spoken by an unseen announcer, right? So they just provide a total overview. Voiceover is used both in audio and video, and it's when we're recording narration over top something else. Now, being familiar with these terms is important because you're certainly going to use them in your script, but I want to see that you're really considering how audio is going to shift your messaging and what sort of content you're going to pull in to negate the fact that there's no visual components happening. Now, again, use those script examples to guide you in formatting your own script. I'll be sure to share the slides on Brightspace as well so that you have them to reference back to.